The private wing of Vermont Medical Tower never smelled like sickness. It smelled like money. Antiseptic was softened by imported air filters. Machines hummed gently, calibrated not to alarm but to reassure. Even silence felt expensive here, thick, padded, intentional. Dr. Malrek Uthian stood at the foot of the bed, tablet resting against his forearm, eyes fixed not on the screen but on the man lying beneath white sheets. Aurelian Covey had built half the city's water systems. Now his body was quietly failing him. The monitors showed what the doctor already knew. Organ stress. Neurotoxicity indicators. Renal collapse moving faster than it should. Too fast. Dr. Uthian removed his glasses and pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of his nose. He had practiced this moment in his head more times than he cared to admit. Still, the words felt heavier when spoken aloud. 48 hours, he said. No one reacted immediately. They never did in rooms like this. At the leather seating area near the panoramic glass wall, 2 lawyers sat side by side. One adjusted his cufflinks. The other quietly opened a black folder, sliding a document across the table as if this were a board meeting instead of a bedside vigil. Dates were being discussed. Not treatment dates. Funeral dates. Esme Covey, Aurelian's mother, sat closest to the bed. Her back was straight, her hands folded tightly around a silver rosary polished smooth by decades of prayer. Her lips moved soundlessly, stitching old hymns together with whispered pleas. Across the room, standing near the heart monitor, was Lucien Covey, Aurelian's half-brother. Lucien watched the screen with careful calm. His expression was composed, sympathetic, almost rehearsed. He nodded once when the doctor spoke, as if confirming a forecast he had already accepted. "Is there truly nothing else?" one of the lawyers asked, voice low. Dr. Uthian hesitated. There it was again, that uncomfortable pause. The one that came when science and certainty refused to align. "We'll continue supportive care," he said carefully. "But the progression is aggressive." Lucien stepped forward, hands clasped. "My brother has always pushed himself," he said gently. "Stress, travel, responsibility. Perhaps his body is simply giving up?" Esme cut in sharply. Lucien turned to her with practiced softness. "No, Mama. I meant he gave everything." Esme's eyes did not soften. They hardened. "My son has survived droughts, wars, and betrayal," she said quietly. "Do not explain weakness to me." Silence returned. Outside the glass wall, the city stretched endlessly, rooftops, roads, rivers, pipelines. Infrastructure Aurelian had helped design pulsed beneath the streets like veins. The irony did not escape Dr. Uthian. The man who brought water to millions now lay dying from something that behaved like poison. Outside the tower. Several floors below, beyond the controlled air and tinted glass, the heat pressed down mercilessly. Bare feet burned against concrete baked by the afternoon sun. Neria Soli stood just beyond the iron gates of Vermont Medical Tower, her weight shifting slightly as security guards glanced her way. She did not beg. She never did. Her dress was faded, the hem frayed from too many washings and too few replacements. Dust clung stubbornly to her ankles no matter how often she wiped them clean. In her hands, she held a cracked plastic bottle. The label had long peeled away. The cap was warped. Anyone else would have thrown it out years ago. Neria had kept it like a relic. Inside, the water looked ordinary. Clear. Still. Danger rarely announced itself. She had been standing there since morning, watching black vehicles slide through the gates without slowing. Watching men in suits enter without being questioned. Watching women with soft voices and hard shoes disappear behind glass doors. She had tried once to approach. "Not today," a guard had said without looking at her. Move. So she moved. Across the street. Then back again. Waiting. She knew the man inside was dying. Word traveled fast in places like this, not through official announcements, but through fragments. A nurse's hurried whisper. A guard's careless comment. Big man upstairs, someone had said earlier. They say he won't last 2 days. 2 days. Neria's fingers tightened around the bottle. She had carried it for years without knowing why. Only that letting it go felt wrong, like abandoning a voice that had never learned how to speak. Her mind drifted, as it often did, to the stream near the old railway line. To the smell that had come and gone. To the sickness that followed. To her mother. A car slowed near the gate. A woman inside glanced at Neria, frowned, then looked away. Poverty made people uncomfortable. Truth made them dangerous. The gates opened again. Neria took a breath and stepped forward. "I need to go inside," she said. The guard finally looked at her. And laughed. Back upstairs. Aurelian Covey stirred. It was barely noticeable, a twitch of fingers, a shift beneath the sheets. But Esme noticed immediately. Mothers always did. "My son," she whispered. Aurelian's eyelids fluttered. His breathing hitched, shallow and uneven. For a moment, awareness flickered behind his eyes like a dying bulb. He tried to speak. Only a rasp emerged. Dr. Uthian moved closer. "Mr. Covey? Can you hear me?" Aurelian's gaze drifted, past the doctor, past the lawyers, until it landed briefly on Lucian. Something unreadable passed between them. Then Aurelian swallowed painfully. "Water," he breathed. Lucian smiled gently. "He's confused," he said smoothly. "The medication." "No," Esme said sharply. "He knows that word." Aurelian's fingers twitched again. His lips moved. "Wrong," he whispered. The monitor spiked. Dr. Uthian stiffened. "Prepare to adjust sedation," he said quickly. Lucian stepped back, face calm, hands folded. But his eyes had changed. At the gate. The guard's laughter faded when Neria did not move. "I said go," he snapped. "He will die," Neria said quietly. The words hung in the air, soft, steady, impossible to ignore. "And it won't be natural." The guard stared at her. For a split second, uncertainty cracked his expression. Then training returned. "Get out of here before I call the police." Neria lifted the bottle slightly. "This water," she said. "It is why." Inside the tower, alarms did not sound. Not yet. But something had already begun to shift. Neria Soli had learned early that waiting was a form of survival. You waited for rain. You waited for buses that never came. You waited for sickness to either pass, or take someone with it. So when the guard at the gate threatened to call the police, she did not argue. She simply stepped back to the edge of the pavement and waited again. From where she stood, the hospital's glass walls reflected the city in warped lines. People inside moved slowly, carefully, as if time itself treated them more gently. Neria shifted the cracked plastic bottle in her hand. Sunlight slipped through the fracture along its side, scattering thin white lines that reminded her of the stream. Before the sickness, her world had been small but complete. Their home stood near an abandoned railway line where rusted tracks cut through the land like scars that never healed. Her mother, Tavira, sold boiled groundnuts by the roadside and believed education was the only true escape. They drank from the stream behind the settlement because everyone did. It had always been there. Clear enough to see the stones beneath. Shallow enough for children to play in. Then the smell appeared. At first it was faint. Metallic. Easy to ignore. People complained, but complaints were cheap, and water was not. Soon the sickness followed. Stomach pains. Rashes. Fevers that stayed too long. Tavira was strong. She always had been. Until the morning she collapsed halfway to the road, clutching her side and gripping Neria's wrist as if afraid to let go. At the clinic, the nurse frowned at the results. She said it was probably an infection. She told them to boil their water. They already did. Tavira died 3 weeks later. They called it complications. No one investigated. Before her voice faded, Tavira asked Neria for water from the deep bend of the stream. Neria hesitated, but her mother insisted. When she returned, Tavira took one sip. Then she stopped her hand. "Keep this," she whispered. "One day, someone will ask why." She died that night. Neria never poured the water away. As the afternoon stretched on outside the hospital, shadows grew longer. Guards shifted as the change of duty approached. That was when a nurse named Iria Vale noticed the girl standing alone. She was too still. Not begging. Not pacing. Holding the bottle as if it mattered. Iria asked why she was there. Neria did not raise her voice. She asked if the man inside was dying. When Iria asked how she knew, Neria answered simply that he had said the word water. The nurse stiffened. That detail should not have been known. Upstairs, Dr. Malrek Uthian studied test results that refused to align. The damage suggested exposure that was slow and deliberate. Not an accident. Not sudden. Something introduced over time. Nearby, Lucien Covey ended a phone call and smiled as if nothing were wrong. At the gate, Iria lowered her voice and warned Neria that lying could get her arrested. Neria extended the bottle slightly. She asked her to test it. Just once. Policy said no. Instinct said otherwise. Iria told her to wait. As the nurse turned away, Neria spoke quietly. She said that if no one tested the water, the man upstairs would die believing he deserved it. Inside Vermont Medical Tower, no alarms sounded. No announcements were made. But the truth had already begun to surface. Slow. Patient. Like something that had been waiting its turn. Dr. Malrek Uthian had reviewed thousands of medical charts in his career. Patterns revealed themselves quickly when you knew where to look. This one refused to behave. The numbers on Aurelian Covea's screen suggested exposure that had happened slowly. Measured. Repeated. Not a single catastrophic dose. Not an accident. Something introduced in small amounts, over time. Malrek leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. Illness caused by stress looked different. So did genetic failure. This looked intentional. He pulled up Aurelian's professional history. Water infrastructure projects filled the screen. Treatment plants. Private pipelines. Government contracts approved with unusual speed. One project caught his attention. A rural purification initiative approved years earlier. Praised publicly. Audited privately. Malrek clicked deeper. Environmental reports were missing pages. Follow-up inspections had been waived. That rarely happened without pressure. Across the room, Lucien Covey spoke quietly with a hospital administrator. His voice was calm. Reassuring. He had perfected that tone. When Lucien noticed the doctor watching, he smiled. The kind of smile meant to communicate trust. "Anything new?" Lucien asked. Malrek hesitated. "There are irregularities," he said carefully. Lucien nodded. "There always are," he replied. "Let me know if you need anything." The administrator left with him. Malrek remained seated, staring at the screen. Downstairs, Iria Vale stood near the entrance pretending to check her phone while watching the girl outside. Neria had not moved. The bottle rested against her palm as if it belonged there. Iria thought of her own childhood. Of taps that always ran. Of water she never questioned. She went back inside. In the hospital lab, Iria rinsed a sterile vial and hesitated. She could already imagine the consequences if she was wrong. But if she was right? She poured a small sample from the bottle and sealed it. The water looked innocent. That was the most dangerous kind. Upstairs, Aurelian drifted in and out of consciousness. His thoughts came in fragments. Boardrooms. Contracts. Signatures made too quickly. He remembered a meeting years ago. A warning buried under numbers. Dilution keeps it undetectable, a consultant had said. Within limits, of course. Aurelian had signed anyway. He had trusted Lucien to handle the details. Lucien stood beside the bed now, watching him breathe. Waiting. Aurelian's eyes opened briefly. He tried to speak. Lucien leaned closer. You should rest, he whispered. Aurelian's lips moved. Stream, he rasped. Lucien straightened. His jaw tightened for just a moment before the mask returned. At the lab, the first indicator strip changed color. Iria stared at it, heart pounding. She ran the test again. Then again. Each time, the same result. Contaminants. Heavy metals. Levels too precise to be accidental. She swallowed hard. This wasn't just about one man dying upstairs. This was about an entire community. She sealed the report and slipped it into her pocket instead of submitting it electronically. Outside, Neria looked up as Iria returned. The nurse did not speak. She simply nodded once. Neria closed her eyes. For the first time since her mother died, the waiting felt different. Inside Vermont Medical Tower, power remained quiet. Polished. Unbothered. But beneath it, something had cracked. And once water found the fracture, it never stopped moving. The meeting room overlooked the river that cut through the city like a polished ribbon. From this height, the water looked calm. Controlled. Safe. Lucien Covey preferred rooms like this. Places where truth could be softened by glass and distance. He sat at the head of the table while two executives and a legal advisor listened carefully. No one interrupted him. The situation upstairs is delicate, Lucien said calmly. But contained. One of the executives shifted in his seat. And if it isn't? Lucien folded his hands. Then we manage perception. The lawyer nodded slowly. Documents were slid across the table. Language was adjusted. Responsibilities blurred. Outside the room, Dr. Malrek Uthian stood staring at the river. He had requested the meeting. He had not been invited inside. He already knew what that meant. Back on the ward, Esme Covey sat alone beside her son. The lawyers had left. The machines continued their quiet vigil. She brushed Aurelian's hand gently. It felt colder than it should have. You were always careful, she whispered. You never ignored warnings. Aurelian's breathing caught. His eyelids fluttered. He remembered signing papers late at night. Remembered trusting someone who smiled too easily. Lucien entered the room moments later. His presence filled the space without sound. You should rest, he told Esme softly. I'll handle everything. Esme looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Trust was a habit built over years. Downstairs, Iria Vale sat alone in a supply room staring at the lab results. She had copied them by hand. Printed them under a colleague's login. She knew better. But she also knew what she'd seen. The contaminants matched industrial discharge. Not decay. Not illness. Deliberate. Her hands trembled as she folded the papers and slipped them into her bag. Outside, Neria watched the hospital doors open and close. People passed her without seeing her. She pressed the bottle against her chest. A man in a dark suit stepped out and spoke quietly into his phone. "Move the records," he said. "Tonight." Neria did not understand the words. But she understood the tone. Upstairs, Aurelian's condition worsened. Alarms finally broke the silence. Doctors rushed in. Orders were shouted. Lucien stood back, arms crossed, face calm. Malrec pushed through the crowd. He looked at the chart. Then at Lucien. "This is not natural," Malrec said firmly. Lucien's smile was thin. "Careful," he replied. "Accusations have consequences." Later that night, Malrec received an email. His hospital privileges were under review. No explanation. Just procedure. Iria watched security escort a technician out of the lab. Files were removed. Computers wiped. The building returned to order. Outside, the city lights reflected off the river. Clean on the surface. Poisoned beneath. Neria remained at the gate. Waiting. And somewhere deep inside the tower, the truth was being buried fast. But water remembered everything. Morning arrived quietly at Vermont Medical Tower. Too quietly. The halls were clean. Orderly. As if nothing had happened overnight. Dr. Malrec Uthian stood at the security desk holding an access card that no longer worked. The light flashed red. Again. The guard avoided his eyes. "Administration review," he said. "Temporary." Malrec nodded once. Temporary was how silence always began. Upstairs, Aurelian Covey lay sedated, his condition listed as unstable but controlled. Lucien had ensured the wording sounded hopeful. He stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said softly. "Keep her outside." No attention. The call ended. Lucien glanced at his brother. "You'll rest now," he murmured. Aurelian did not respond. Downstairs, Neria noticed the change immediately. The guards no longer laughed. They watched her. One of them spoke into a radio when she shifted her weight. She tightened her grip on the bottle. Iria Vale arrived for her shift with tension in her shoulders. She felt eyes on her the moment she entered the building. In the locker room, her bag had been moved. Just slightly. A message waited on her phone. Unsent. Drafted. She deleted it without reading. During rounds, an administrator walked beside her. Asking polite questions. Too polite. Outside, a black vehicle idled near the gate. Its windows were tinted too dark to see through. Neria stepped back instinctively. The car did not move. Inside, Esme Covey requested to see the doctor. She was told he was unavailable. That answer did not satisfy her. She made a call of her own. Years earlier, she had funded a journalism fellowship quietly. Not for praise. For leverage. The name she dialed had not changed. At the lab, Iria slipped the copied results into a different pocket. She avoided the terminals. She noticed the water sample log was missing. Deleted. Her stomach tightened. That evening, security approached Neria. Their tone was firm now. "You need to leave," one said. She shook her head. "I was told to wait." They reached for her arm. From the doorway, Iria called out. "Stop." All eyes turned. "I know her," Iria said. "She's with me." It was a lie. But it worked. For now. Inside the tower, Lucien reviewed messages on his phone. The bottle had been sampled. Containment had failed. He exhaled slowly. Some problems required removal. As night settled over the city, Neria sat on a bench inside the hospital for the first time. Her feet no longer burned. But fear did. Somewhere above her, decisions were being made. Quiet ones. Final ones. And for the first time since she arrived, Neria understood something clearly. Waiting was no longer enough. Night pressed against the windows of Vermont Medical Tower, turning glass into mirrors. Reflections stared back at everyone who passed. Lucien Covey stood alone in a quiet corridor, scrolling through messages that required no replies. Everything was moving. Just not loudly. He preferred it that way. Upstairs, Aurelian's breathing became uneven again. The machines adjusted automatically. Numbers rose. Numbers fell. Lucien watched without expression. Across the city, a call was answered on the second ring. Esme Covey spoke calmly, choosing each word with care. She did not accuse. She did not explain. She simply asked a question that could not be ignored. Inside the hospital, Iria Vale could feel the pressure tightening. Colleagues spoke less. Doors closed more often. A supervisor reminded her, gently, that she was replaceable. She nodded. She had already accepted that. Neria sat quietly in a corner of the waiting area, the bottle wrapped inside her cloth bag now. She watched people pass. Doctors. Visitors. Security. Every step felt heavier than the last. A man sat beside her without asking. His suit was too clean. His smile did not reach his eyes. "You've caused some confusion," he said softly. Neria did not answer. "You don't want trouble," the man continued. "Trouble follows people who misunderstand their place." She looked at him then. Her voice was steady. "My mother died," she said. The man stood and walked away. Upstairs, Dr. Malrek Uthian packed his office in silence. His access was gone. His emails unanswered. Before leaving, he copied one final file onto a personal drive. He paused only once. Then he walked out. In the early hours of morning, Iria received a message from an unknown number. "You are being watched." She deleted it. Then saved the lab photos to 3 different locations. At dawn, Neria was escorted outside again. Not roughly. Not kindly. Just removed. She stood across the street as the hospital doors closed behind her. For the first time since arriving, she considered leaving. But above her, a man was dying. And beneath that truth, something far larger was sick. Lucien stood at the window as the sun rose. The city looked clean from above. He allowed himself a small smile. Everything ended eventually. He did not hear the message arrive on his phone. Not at first. The subject line was short. Independent lab confirmation. Lucien's smile faded. Outside, Neria tightened her grip on the bottle once more. Waiting had brought her this far. Now, it was time to be seen. The morning news played quietly in the hospital cafe. Muted voices. Smiling anchors. No one mentioned Vermont Medical Tower. Yet. Lucien Covey sat alone with a cup of untouched coffee, eyes fixed on his phone. The independent lab results were brief. Clinical. Undeniable. The contaminants matched industrial discharge linked to a private water project approved years earlier. His project. He forwarded the message once. Then deleted it. Containment had failed, but damage could still be controlled. Across the street, Neria watched people gather near the entrance. A journalist had arrived. She recognized the posture before the badge. Curiosity disguised as politeness. Inside, Esme Covey stood straighter than she had in days. She did not rush. She never did when the stakes were real. She asked for the journalist by name. The man introduced himself as Kairo Dentsu. He did not pretend this was a casual visit. "Your son is dying," he said quietly. "And someone wants that to stay simple." Esme nodded once. "Nothing about this has ever been simple." In a supply corridor, Iria Vale felt her phone vibrate. A single message. "I have confirmation. Meet me." She did not reply. She slipped the lab photos into a folded document sleeve and continued her shift as if nothing had changed. Upstairs, Aurelian stirred. For the first time in days, his eyes opened fully. The fog lifted just enough. Lucien entered the room moments later. His tone was warm. Familiar. "We'll get through this," he said. Aurelian looked at him for a long time. "Did you test it?" he whispered. Lucien froze. "The water," Aurelian continued. "From the settlements." Lucien smiled slowly. "You're confused." Aurelian's grip tightened weakly around the sheet. "No," he said. Lucien straightened. The warmth drained from his voice. "You should rest." Downstairs, Kairo Dentsu stepped outside and saw Neria standing alone across the street. She was not trying to approach. She was watching. He crossed the road. "You've been here a while," he said. Neria nodded. "You know why I'm here," she replied. Kairo glanced at the bottle in her bag. He did not ask yet. Inside the tower, alarms sounded again. Doctors rushed in. Orders overlapped. Lucien remained at the doorway, listening. This time, fear edged its way in. Iria slipped out a side exit just before sunset. She met Kairo beneath a pedestrian bridge. No cameras. No witnesses. She handed him the sleeve. "This isn't a mistake," she said. "It's deliberate." Kairo exhaled slowly as he scanned the pages. "This will break something," he said. "It should," Iria replied. Across the city, servers began copying files they were never meant to release. Lucien stood alone in the executive washroom, staring at his reflection. The calm mask cracked. Not completely. Just enough. Outside, Neria sat on the curb beside the road. Traffic moved past her in long streams. For the first time, someone had listened. Waiting had turned into momentum. And once momentum began, it did not ask permission. The story did not break loudly at first. It leaked. A paragraph posted without promotion. A document uploaded without explanation. A name mentioned once, then repeated. By midday, phones across the city buzzed with the same notification. Water project. Contamination. Executive silence. Inside Vermont Medical Tower, the mood shifted. Voices dropped. Eyes followed movements too closely. Lucien Covey stood in an emergency meeting room, watching the first headlines appear on a screen. He did not raise his voice. He did not panic. "This is speculation," he said calmly. "It will pass." The lawyer beside him was not convinced. "Public concern doesn't pass," she said. Across the street, cameras appeared. Not many. Just enough. Neria watched from the edge of the crowd. No one recognized her yet. Kairo Dentsu stood near a van, phone pressed to his ear. The confirmation had spread faster than he expected. Inside, Iria Vale was pulled aside by her supervisor. The conversation was short. Formal. She was placed on administrative leave. Upstairs, Aurelian's condition stabilized briefly. Enough for awareness. He asked for his mother. Esme arrived alone. She sat beside him and held his hand. "The water," he said weakly. "I know," she replied. He closed his eyes. Tears slid quietly into his hair. Lucien entered moments later and stopped when he saw Esme's expression. "You knew," she said. Lucien did not answer. Outside, a chant rose from the crowd. "Not angry yet. Curious. What's in the water?" Security tightened the perimeter. Cairo's article updated itself with new documents. Names. Dates. Signatures. Lucien's phone vibrated continuously. Inside the tower, systems began locking. Access restricted. Emails frozen. Lucien retreated into a private office and closed the door. For the first time, his hands shook. Downstairs, Neria felt someone touch her shoulder. She turned to see Iria standing beside her. "They're listening now," Iria said. Neria nodded. Above them, the machines continued their steady rhythm. Time did not stop for truth. And once the public had tasted it, silence was no longer an option. Sirens were not part of the plan. Yet they echoed through the street just after dusk, cutting through the low murmur of the crowd outside Vermont Medical Tower. People turned. Phones lifted. 2 unmarked vehicles slowed near the entrance. Men in plain clothes stepped out, badges visible but unannounced. Inside the building, Lucien Covey felt it before he saw it. The shift in air. The pause in conversations. He straightened his jacket and checked his reflection. The mask returned. Cairo Dentsu watched from across the street as officials entered the tower. He didn't follow. Not yet. This was no longer just a story. Inside, Esme Covey stood in the corridor outside her son's room when the men approached her. They spoke respectfully. Quietly. She nodded once and stepped aside. Upstairs, Aurelian drifted between pain and clarity. The medication dulled his body, not his memory. He remembered the warnings he'd ignored. The meetings he'd rushed. The trust he'd misplaced. Lucien entered the room with practiced calm. "We'll handle this," he said. Aurelian looked at him. Not with anger. With recognition. "You chose speed," Aurelian whispered. Lucien did not respond. In a conference room, officials reviewed documents pulled from multiple sources. Lab results. Internal emails. Financial trails. The pattern was undeniable. Downstairs, Iria Vale sat on the steps beside Neria. Neither spoke. The crowd outside had grown. Not loud. Focused. Inside the tower, Lucien was asked to step away from the executive floor. It was phrased politely. He complied. For now. Cairo received confirmation on his phone. Formal inquiry initiated. He exhaled slowly and began drafting the next update. Upstairs, Aurelian requested to speak. Not privately. Not later. Now. Esme stood beside him. Her hand steady on his shoulder. Lucien remained at the back of the room. "I signed what I should have questioned," Aurelian said weakly. "I trusted what I should have verified." The room was silent. Outside, Neria looked up at the building. The windows glowed softly against the night. For the first time, the tower did not feel untouchable. Inside, the investigation moved forward quietly. Methodically. And Lucien Covey understood something he had never allowed himself to before. This was no longer about control. It was about consequences. The room felt smaller once the doors were closed. Not because of the walls, but because of what could no longer be avoided. Lucien Covey stood near the window while the officials spoke in measured tones. No accusations yet. Just questions. He answered calmly. Carefully. Years of preparation showed in every word. Across the table, files were opened one by one. Approval signatures. Email chains. Payment transfers routed through third parties. Each document narrowed the space between denial and truth. Lucien did not raise his voice. He did not lose composure. He simply adjusted. Upstairs, Aurelian's strength returned in brief flashes. Long enough to remember. Long enough to regret. Esme stayed beside him, listening without interrupting. I thought speed meant progress, Aurelian said softly. I thought silence meant efficiency. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Outside, Neria stood at the edge of the crowd. A camera passed over her once, then moved on. She did not step forward. Not yet. Iria Vale watched from nearby, arms folded tightly. Her future felt uncertain. But her conscience did not. Inside the tower, Lucien was asked about the Rural Purification Initiative. About missing inspections. About waived reports. For the first time, he hesitated. Only a second. But it was enough. Cairo Densu's next article went live. This one carried names. Timelines. Direct links. The crowd outside reacted. Not with anger. With recognition. This was real. Lucien's phone vibrated again. A message from legal counsel. Prepare for detainment. He read it twice. Upstairs, Aurelian asked for Neria. The request stunned everyone in the room. She should be here, he said. Security hesitated. Esme nodded. Outside, Neria was guided through the doors for the first time without resistance. She walked the halls slowly, bottle held close. When she reached the room, Aurelian looked at her. Truly looked. I'm sorry, he whispered. Neria said nothing. She didn't need to. The truth stood between them. In the corridor, Lucien was informed he would not be leaving the building. His smile did not return. Outside, the night air felt heavier. Inside, something long delayed had finally arrived. Lucien Covey did not resist when he was escorted to a private office. Resistance suggested guilt. Silence suggested control. He sat alone while legal teams argued in other rooms. His phone lay face down on the table. Useless now. Upstairs, Aurelian watched Neria stand at the foot of his bed. The bottle rested in her hands like something fragile and heavy at once. You carried it all this time, he said faintly. She nodded. 4 people who never listened. Esme stepped closer. She had not cried yet. That came later. I will make this right, Aurelian said. Not as a promise. As a confession. Outside, Cairo Densu answered calls without stopping. The story had crossed borders now. Other journalists were asking questions he had not thought to ask. The water project appeared in more reports. So did the illnesses. In the tower, Iria Vale was asked to provide a formal statement. She told the truth slowly. Carefully. No one interrupted her. In the private office, Lucien stared at the wall and calculated. Settlements. Delays. Strategies that no longer fit the situation. For the first time, there was no clean exit. Upstairs, Aurelian's condition worsened again. The doctor spoke quietly in the hallway. Time was running out. Aurelian asked for one thing. A recording device. I need to say this myself, he said. Esme hesitated. Then nodded. The camera light turned on. Outside, Neria waited. She had done what her mother asked. Inside the tower, the truth was no longer moving slowly. It was accelerating. And Lucien Covey understood, finally, that some consequences did not negotiate. The recording light blinked once, then held steady. Aurelian Covey lay propped carefully against the pillows, oxygen running softly at his side. The machines were quieter now, not because he was improving, but because there was less left to measure. Esme stood just outside the frame. She did not touch him. She did not interrupt. This moment belonged to truth. Aurelian took a shallow breath. Then another. "My name is Aurelian Covey," he said slowly. "I approved infrastructure projects that affected millions of lives." His voice weakened, but it did not waver. "I was warned," he continued. "About contamination risks. About shortcuts disguised as efficiency." He closed his eyes briefly, gathering strength. "I trusted oversight to people who benefited from speed." Lucien's name was not spoken yet. Not because it was unknown, but because it deserved its own weight. Outside the room, Lucien sat alone with two officials. The questions had stopped being polite. Dates were read aloud. Amounts confirmed. Lucien listened without expression. But something had changed. For the first time, he was no longer directing the flow. Downstairs, the crowd outside the tower grew denser. Not louder. More deliberate. Cameras pointed upward now. At windows. At symbols. Cairo Dentsu stood back, watching the building instead of his screen. He had learned when not to rush a moment. Inside, Iria Vale handed over her phone voluntarily. Not because she was asked. Because she wanted nothing hidden. Her statement was recorded in full. So were the lab results. The water sample log was reconstructed piece by piece. Patterns emerged that could not be erased. Upstairs, Aurelian's voice grew softer. "I failed to question what benefited me," he said. "And people paid for that failure." Neria stood just beyond the doorway, listening. She did not step closer. This was not about forgiveness. This was about acknowledgement. Aurelian turned his head slightly. His eyes found her. "There was a girl," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "She carried proof no one wanted to see." Neria lowered her gaze. She waited, Aurelian continued. "Longer than any person should have to." His breath hitched. "If this reaches anyone," he said, "then let it be known that the contamination was not accidental." Lucien shifted in his chair as the words echoed down the corridor through speakers he had not realized were live. For the first time, his composure fractured. "Shut that off," he said sharply. No one moved. The officials exchanged a look. Upstairs, Aurelian spoke Lucien's name. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just clearly. Lucien closed his eyes. Years of careful positioning collapsed into a single sound. Outside, the crowd went silent as the broadcast fed into news vans. Phones lifted higher. Esme pressed a hand to her mouth. Tears finally came. Not for her son's words. But for how long they had waited to be said. Aurelian's strength began to fade quickly after that. The confession had taken what little remained. Doctors moved in quietly. Efficiently. Lucien was escorted to his feet. This time, there was no pretense. He did not struggle. He did not speak. As he was led away, his eyes met Neria's once. There was no hatred there. Only the realization that control had limits. Upstairs, Aurelian's breathing slowed. Then steadied. For the first time since arriving, Neria stepped fully into the room. She placed the bottle gently on the table beside the bed. "It's done," she said softly. Aurelian did not answer. But his fingers twitched. Outside, the city held its breath. Water still flowed through its pipes. But now, it carried memory with it. And memory was harder to bury than truth. The machines did not rush when Aurelian Covey slipped further away. They adjusted. Softened. As if even technology understood this was no longer a battle, but a vigil. Esme sat beside the bed now, holding her son's hand with both of hers. She spoke quietly, not to keep him alive, but to keep him company. "You were stubborn," she said. "And kind in the ways that never showed on paper." Aurelian's breathing slowed. Each breath felt deliberate. Counted. Outside the room, doctors spoke in low tones. There was nothing left to escalate. Only to witness. Neria stood near the wall, uncertain of her place. For most of her life, rooms like this had not existed for her. Yet here she was. Iria Vale watched from the corridor, arms folded tightly, exhaustion finally catching her. She had not slept. None of them had. Downstairs, Lucien Covey was led into a secured interview room. The glass was clear. The chair bolted to the floor. For the first time, there were no assistants. No advisors. Only questions. "Did you authorize the dilution adjustments?" an investigator asked. Lucien leaned back slightly. He considered denial. Then calculation. "Yes," he said. The word landed without drama. "It was within acceptable variance," he continued. "The reports were designed to reflect." "Designed," the investigator repeated. Lucien stopped speaking. Across the city, Cairo Densu's broadcast replayed Aurelian's confession on loop. The city listened. Not angrily. Not yet. With recognition. People in the settlements gathered around shared screens. Faces appeared in the crowd. Names long ignored found language. The stream was mentioned. The illnesses. The deaths. Neria's mother's story was not unique. That was the point. Upstairs, Aurelian stirred once more. His eyes opened just long enough to focus. He looked at Esme. Then at Neria. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Not for himself. For everything else. Esme pressed her forehead to his hand. "You came back," she said. "That matters." Aurelian exhaled slowly. The machines softened their rhythm again. Doctors stepped back. No announcement was made. No time recorded aloud. But everyone in the room understood. Aurelian Covey was gone. Silence followed. Not the expensive silence of boardrooms. The heavy silence of finality. Esme did not scream. She did not collapse. She closed her eyes and breathed. Neria lowered her head. She felt no victory. Only release. Downstairs, Lucien was informed of his brother's death. He nodded once. Then the questions resumed. This time, they did not stop. Outside, the crowd shifted. Someone began to cry. Someone else knelt. Cameras captured the hospital lights dimming in one wing. Inside Vermont Medical Tower, a chapter closed. But the story did not end. Water never stopped moving. Morning did not soften the city. It exposed it. Sunlight revealed crowds that had not gone home. Faces lined the street outside Vermont Medical Tower, quiet now, not chanting, not demanding. Listening. Inside, Esme Covey stood alone in a private room, dressed in black before anyone had asked her to. Grief had not made her weak. It had made her precise. She signed documents slowly. Death certificates. Release forms. Then she stopped. "There will be conditions," she said calmly. The administrator across from her hesitated. "My son's projects," Esme continued. "They will be reopened. All of them." No one argued. Downstairs, Lucien Covea's name appeared on official filings for the first time. Not as an executive. As a subject. The language was careful. But irreversible. In the interview room, Lucien watched his reflection in the glass. He had not slept. He had not asked for water. The irony did not escape him. "You understand the scope of this," an investigator said. Lucien nodded. "This will not stay contained to one project," the man continued. Lucien smiled faintly. "It never does." Across the city, Cairo Dentsu's reporting expanded. Other journalists joined. Other documents surfaced. Patterns stretched wider than anyone expected. Communities began to speak. Not one. Dozens. The water had carried more than poison. It had carried silence. At the hospital, Aria Vale handed in her badge. Not because she was forced. Because she chose to. "I won't work in a place that punishes truth," she said. No one stopped her. Outside, Neria stood near the curb, unsure where to go next. The bottle was no longer in her hands. It had been logged as evidence. For the first time in years, her fingers felt empty. Esme found her there. "You waited," Esme said. Neria nodded. "You did more than wait," Esme replied. She placed a card in Neria's hand. "No promise. Just access." Across town, authorities moved quietly. Bank accounts frozen. Assets flagged. Documents seized. Lucien was transferred just before dusk. No cameras allowed. He did not ask for mercy. He asked for efficiency. The city did not grant it. That night, the river reflected unfamiliar colors. Emergency lights. News vans. The water still moved forward. But now, it carried names. The court building did not look powerful. It looked tired. Stone worn smooth by decades of footsteps. Doors scarred by history. Justice rarely announced itself with grandeur. Lucien Covey was brought in through a side entrance just after sunrise. No cameras. No statements. His wrists were free. For now. Inside, files filled entire tables. Projects. Budgets. Environmental assessments rewritten too cleanly. The judge listened without expression. So did Lucien. He had always believed numbers were neutral. That responsibility could be diluted the same way contamination had been. This room did not agree. Across the city, communities gathered around radios and borrowed screens. Names were read aloud. Places mentioned. People recognized their own lives in the testimony. The stream near the railway line was photographed that morning. Still flowing. Still dangerous. For the first time, warning signs were placed around it. Neria stood with a small group near the barricade. No one asked her to speak. They already knew her story. Esme Covey watched the proceedings from a private gallery. Her grief had sharpened into resolve. When documents surfaced that bore her son's signature, she did not look away. "He failed," she said quietly to Cairo Dentsu beside her. But he did not hide. Cairo nodded. That mattered. Iria Vale testified in the afternoon. Her voice trembled once. Then steadied. She spoke of altered logs. Deleted records. Pressure disguised as protocol. Lucien listened carefully. He did not interrupt. When asked to respond, he stood slowly. "I optimized systems," he said. "I did not invent greed." The room remained silent. Outside, the city waited. By evening, the charges were formal. Negligence. Fraud. Endangerment. Words that carried weight. Lucien was remanded. This time, restraints were applied. He did not protest. As he was led away, he passed a screen replaying Aurelian's confession. For the first time, he did not look away. Night fell. Across the settlements, water trucks arrived under police escort. Temporary. Insufficient. But real. Neria watched children fill containers without fear. Not yet cured. But safer. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt something loosen inside her chest. The truth had not saved everyone. But it had reached them. And sometimes, that was how healing began. The sentencing did not happen quickly. Justice never did when it had to account for scale. Days passed while arguments were weighed. Evidence replayed. Communities named. Lucien Covey sat through every session without interruption. No outbursts. No apologies. Only attention. The court listened to experts explain dilution thresholds. To doctors describing symptoms that never appeared in textbooks. To families who spoke in quiet voices about people who never came home. The stream near the railway line was mentioned again. And again. Each time, Neria felt her chest tighten. She sat near the back with Iria Vale, both of them anonymous to most of the room. That anonymity did not erase their presence. Esme Covey attended every day. Always dressed simply. Always seated straight. When her son's confession was replayed in full, she closed her eyes. Not to escape it. To remember him clearly. Lucien finally spoke on the fourth day. Not to deny responsibility. But to explain it. I believed control could manage consequence, he said evenly. I was wrong. The judge did not respond. Judges rarely did in moments like that. When the sentence was delivered, the room did not erupt. It exhaled. Lucien was led away without ceremony. Without spectacle. Outside, cameras captured only the doors closing. Across the city, reactions varied. Anger in some places. Relief in others. No one called it justice. Not yet. Weeks later, Vermont Medical Tower reopened one wing under new administration. Audits became routine. Transparency was no longer optional. Iria Vale returned to medicine at a smaller clinic. Less polished. More honest. She worked longer hours now. But she slept better. Cairo Densu's reporting expanded into a series. Not just about one company. But about systems that rewarded silence. His work earned attention. And resistance. He accepted both. Esme Covey established a foundation quietly. It funded water testing in rural communities. Independent. Uninfluenced. She did not name it after her son. She named it after accountability. Neria's life changed slowly. Not with sudden comfort. But with direction. She returned to the settlement once. Stood near the stream as workers sealed access points. She did not feel victory. Only closure. The bottle was returned to her eventually. Empty now. Cleaned. She placed it beside her mother's photograph. It no longer held evidence. It held memory. The city moved on, as cities always did. Pipes were replaced. Contracts rewritten. But beneath it all, something remained altered. People asked questions sooner. Listened longer. Water still flowed. But now, it carried history. And history, once acknowledged, refused to disappear. Time did not rush to heal what had been exposed. It moved carefully. As if aware that some wounds closed only when they were left alone long enough. Months passed. Not quietly, but steadily. The settlements near the railway line changed first. Pipes were replaced section by section. Independent testers returned again and again. This time, no one argued with them. Children were told not to touch the stream. Then, slowly, they were told they could again. Neria watched the water one morning as sunlight broke across its surface. It no longer smelled metallic. It no longer burned the skin. Still, she did not drink from it yet. Trust, like water, took time to run clean. Iria Vale visited the settlement twice a week. She did not wear a uniform anymore. Just simple clothes and a quiet smile. People trusted her. Not because of titles. But because she stayed. Cairo Dentsu's work began appearing in classrooms. Journalism students studied the case not for drama, but for structure. How silence was built. How it broke. He received invitations he declined. Awards he accepted reluctantly. The story was not his alone. Esme Covey traveled rarely now. When she did, it was without announcements. She met engineers, inspectors, local leaders. She asked the same question every time. Who watches you? And she waited for the answer. Lucien Covey adjusted to confinement without protest. Control was no longer an option. Routine was. He read. He listened. At night, when the facility was quiet, he replayed moments that could not be undone. Not with anger. With clarity. Aurelian's voice visited him often. Not in accusation. In memory. You should have checked. Lucien never argued back. Neria enrolled in classes at a community institute. Environmental studies. Water safety. She did not tell anyone why. They already knew. On her desk sat the empty bottle. A reminder. Not of loss. Of purpose. One afternoon, she stood before a small group of students and spoke for the first time publicly. Her voice did not shake. She spoke about waiting. About listening. About how truth did not need power to exist. Only patience. Outside, rain began to fall. Soft. Even. The kind that soaked the ground slowly instead of tearing it open. For the first time in years, the water did not carry fear with it. And that, more than anything else, felt like change. The city did not mark the anniversary. No banners. No speeches. Life rarely paused to acknowledge the moment it learned something important. Vermont Medical Tower stood where it always had, glass washed clean by time and scrutiny. New names filled its offices. New procedures governed its halls. But some rooms remained quiet out of respect. Esme Covey visited one of them once a year. She did not stay long. She never brought flowers. Grief, she had learned, did not need reminders. She left behind reports instead. Water quality data. Inspection schedules. Signed commitments. Promises made visible. In the settlements, pipes ran beneath the ground where children no longer feared the stream. Trust returned slowly, unevenly, but it returned. Neria stood near the railway line one evening, watching the sun dip behind the tracks. The bottle was no longer with her. She had let it go. Evidence was meant to move forward. Not follow. She worked now with teams that tested water before it was ever approved. Not to accuse. To prevent. When people asked how she learned to wait so long, she smiled gently. I didn't, she said. I just didn't leave. Iria Vale continued her work quietly. Healing did not make headlines. It did not need to. She saw fewer patients now who were sick without explanation. That alone was enough. Cairo Dentsu moved on to other stories. But he returned sometimes. Not as a journalist. As a witness. Lucien Covey served his sentence without appeal. Control had finally given way to understanding. He read about water systems. About ethics. About how small decisions scaled when left unchecked. Some lessons arrived too late to change outcomes. But not too late to matter. One morning, rain fell over the city. Not heavy. Not dramatic. Clean. It filled reservoirs. Was filtered. Tested. Released. Water flowed through pipes that carried more than pressure. They carried accountability. And somewhere beneath the streets, beneath the concrete and contracts and memory, the truth continued to move. Patient. Persistent. Like water always did. If this story stayed with you, don't let it end here. Stories like this are not told to entertain. They are told so we remember what silence can cost, and what truth can change. If you believe stories still matter, subscribe. Not for algorithms, but for the voices that wait to be heard. And if this story moved you, share it. Because the truth only travels as far as we are willing to carry it.